Today is January 22nd, and it is 2 p.m., and the Board of Commissioners' regular workshop meeting is now called to order. Will the City Clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Black.
Present.
Vice Mayor Weinstein.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Oakley.
Here.
Commissioner Douther.
Present.
Next on the agenda, we have public comment. This is for public comment that is not on the agenda. You have 3 minutes to speak, and please state your name, address, and speak clearly into the microphone. I now open the floor for anyone who wishes to speak.
Hi, good afternoon. Doug Andrews, 141st. I sent a letter to the board and to city manager and city attorney asking that the 3 candidates for the commission positions, besides obviously Commissioner Douther, who sits on the board, get the same amount of time with the auditors to ask questions, and I've never received an answer to that. This is going to be a huge topic in the debates and in the election coming up, and it really puts Commissioner Douthat on an unfair scale with the rest of us. So I was curious if that was discussed, if there's anything that, Ralph, can you answer that question for me, or can anybody?
Today is the forum for you to ask your questions, where there's going to be some cards handed out that'll be coming up. Today is mostly about issues for public comment that are not going to be discussed today. But as we get into the hearing on the audit, there'll be a process that's explained to you where there's a bunch of cards you can fill out and put your questions there.
Right.
You're not yet an elected commissioner. Once you are, then you're a commissioner. But right now, you're just a citizen.
Okay, so the answer is no then.
Yeah, today is the day you can ask all your questions. On
a card. I can't sit in here and ask.
If you have a question, write it on the card, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to come up and do public comment again after the presentation by the auditors and questions by commissioners. They're going to go to public comment again at that point. But there'll be also additional time where you can write your questions on cards, and all those questions will get answered. So if you have questions, put them
and
on the cards that are in the back. You can start writing those down now.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Floor is now closed for public comment. Next on the agenda is the Marina Forensic Audit Report. We have Glenn Gilliard and Ben Kincaid here, representatives from Carr, Riggs & Ingram. City Manager, do you have any comments?
No, Madam Mayor, we can have the representatives from the audit firm begin with their presentation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Evans, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Pierce, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm Glenn Gilliard, and this is Ben Kincaid, and we're with the accounting firm of Carr, Riggs & Ingram. We're assigned out of the Destin office, and it's been our pleasure to assist with this engagement. Carr, Riggs & Ingram is a fairly large firm. We're among the top 20 in the United States. We are approved by the state of Florida to provide state contract services through the state and its municipalities. Of the 67 counties in the state of Florida, we audit 19. We audit 41 cities, and including Pinellas County School Board, City of Largo, City of Gulfport, City of Treasure Island. We have 2 local offices, one in Tampa, one in Clearwater. And our Clearwater, one of our partners, Chad Whetstone, is with us today. I'd like to say thank you to Chad because he assisted us with this engagement, and he and his local staff provided a lot of support. So I'm very grateful to that. Madam Mayor and Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to present our report to you today. We do have a PowerPoint presentation, and Ben's going to present that, at the end of which we'll be glad to entertain any questions or issues you may have. And so I will turn it over to Ben.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Before we get into the background information regarding the forensic examination that we conducted on the marina, one item I do want to note is at the top of each one of our slides there are page numbers. And in this particular instance, page numbers 2 through 6. Those page numbers correspond to the pages in the forensic examination report. So as we're going through, just because of time constraints, if we don't necessarily cover an item in great detail, or if you have questions or would like additional information regarding that, we encourage you to read those sections of the report, and we also highly encourage you to read the forensic examination report in its entirety. So for those of you that don't have a lot of familiarity with the marina operations, it is a city enterprise fund. There's fuel sales, rentals, as well as other merchandise related sales at the marina operations. During the last fiscal audit that was performed by the city's external auditor, Wells Hauser, they identified some red flags during their analytics that were performed on the marina operations. The city's external auditor recommended that the city have a forensic examination of the marina be done. After receiving that information from the city's external auditor, the city started looking into some of the internal controls. And within some of those internal controls, there were some additional concerns, such as inoperable cameras. And so the city began contacting accounting firms, CRI being among those. We had a conversation with city management in June of 2018, and at that time we essentially agreed that we would come into the city and essentially do a look-see, if you will, of the marina operations up to $15,000, and see if there was anything amiss or anything to those red flags or concerns that were raised by the city's external auditor and the city management. During the performance of our initial procedures, we did identify some items of concern that we'll go into later detail in our presentation. And based off of that information, city management requested approval for our firm, CRI, to go in and complete the full forensic examination of the marina, and the Board of Commissioners subsequently approved that request. The period of review that we will be talking about today, we essentially looked at February of 2015 all the way through August 1st of 2018, which is when we did our initial field work here, and that allowed us to get a historical time frame for trends and things of that nature. Some of the areas concerns listed are here, some wet slips regarding the rentals, fuel, boat launch ramps, among other items that we'll go into as well. For those of you that may not have had the opportunity to visit the marina operations, here is a satellite overview of the marina. You can see the various dry storage areas. You can also see some of the wet slips, the ship store, and there's an area as well for the Public Works Department. Within our finding on the wet slips that's detailed within the dry storage area, that's detailed within our report, there's essentially three areas that we'll go into a little bit more detail, and those are on the wet slips, the dry storage, and the late fees. So as a general overview for both the wet slips and the dry storage area, there's essentially two types of customers at the marina. There's your long-term customers, that's generally defined to be customers that are staying at the marina longer than 30 days, and you have transient customers that are generally less than 30 days, although you may have some exceptions to that. Any of the agreements that the marina requires these customers to sign, all those are maintained and documented by the marina. Most of those are hard copy documents. They're not scanned in or provided to other city departments or reviewed by any other city department. In our review of a sample of those documentation, we found a general lack of completeness within those contracts. Basic things such as signatures, customer information, billing rates, boat information were missing from those contracts. Within the billings that we analyzed for both the wet slip and the dry storage areas, we identified numerous incorrect postings within the marina's general ledgers. Things such as boat launch ramp fees were being posted under rental income, long-term rentals were being posted underneath transient income, and other items. We also identified that there were some transients that were billed at long-term storage rates. Per the fee schedule that is established by the Board of Commissioners, there is a higher rate for transient rentals versus long-term renters. And within the 295 monthly dry storage renters that we identified during the period of our review, only 6 of those were actually billed at the correct higher transient rates. There was also numerous inaccurate billing rates where marina customers essentially overpaid in some cases and because of manual inputs or overrides by marina staff. We also identified several voided or deleted invoices. Some of these voided or deleted invoices occurred several months after the invoices had already been done. I think in one case, it was over 6 months afterwards, invoice was deleted or voided out. When our discussions and interviews with marina staff, they were very adamant in indicating to us that there were no freebies at the marina. There was no special discounts that were provided to any city employees or any marina customers or anyone for that matter. They do have a long waiting list for the dry storage and the wet slip areas that they maintain, but they do try and keep some spaces available for transient rentals. The rationale for that is that they can generate more revenue because they can charge those transients a higher rate. They do perform some counts at the marina as far as occupancy. They maintain to us that they have a high occupancy rate and that they're constantly overbooking or always booked, whether that be the dry storage or the wet slip areas. One of the first things that we noticed on performance of initial procedures was that the city's CAFR, as well as the city's websites, reflect that the city has 93 wet slips. If you go down to the docks, there's a substantial less number of wet slips there that we were able to observe. And so we looked into the permitting process from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And in there, we were able to determine that the city is authorized to have 93 wet slips. Of those, only 85 are allowed to be rented. The marina, because of different reconfigurations that they made at the marina, they had stated on their wet slips worksheets that they have that there was 71 wet slips available for rent. We had actually determined that there were 72. Within those permit and lease requirements from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, there's various requirements that the department has on the marina. Some of those are that the liveaboard rentals are limited to one specific dock, Dock A. Those liveaboards can't stay in excess of 6 months during a 12-month time frame, and there's supposed to be 10 boat lifts at the marina. Based upon our observations and the data analytics that we performed, we identified non-compliance with each one of these requirements. There were liveaboard rentals on Dock A along the seawall. There was liveaboard rentals that were staying in excess of 6 months, in some cases several years, and there was only 8 out of the required 10 boat lifts at the marina. We don't know what the effect of these non-compliance is with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, or what type of action they would take if they were made aware of these variances. So just some general background on the wet slips. They do allow liveaboard renters at the marina. Marina staff indicated to us that that stopped approximately 1 year ago at the time of our review, and they were no longer accepting new liveaboard renters. Within our data that we reviewed, we identified several new liveaboard renters within the last several months at the point of our review. We also identified that those liveaboard renters weren't being assessed the required vessel inspection fees as mandated by the fee schedule authorized by the Board of Commissioners. Within the wet slips, the boats are charged on a per foot basis depending upon the type of vessel or the type of customer. So we went back through and performed boat registration searches on a sample of the boats at the marina to determine whether or not that the footage of the boat listed on the boat registrations matched or corresponded to what was being billed to the customers. In the majority of cases, the marina was billing the correct rate per foot, or the correct footage. They did indicate to us that although there's identified wet slips on the revocable use agreements, they do move vessels around from time to time to accommodate other vessels or for a variety of other reasons. So there was a movement that would not be reflected on those revocable use agreements. We subsequently asked marina staff essentially how do they went through and verified that they are capturing and generating 100% of the revenue from the customers that stayed at the marina. The response that we got was essentially that they know when stuff shows up at the marina because of the size of the operation. They know when a new boat comes in or, through their daily walkthroughs or regular walkthroughs, they know if something new shows up. They don't go through with any type of customer list that shows, these type of customers or these customer names were billed during that month, and compare that to what is actually present at the wet slips. They also don't have any type of written documentation or otherwise of going around and counting those wet slips or the time periods or the days that they did those counts, and they weren't really even able to provide us with the frequency of when they did those regular counts. The wet slips are not identified at the marina. It's very hard to distinguish between slip A1 and slip A20. You have to go to the permits and figure out that information or the marina work sheets. Within our own observations, to essentially confirm the marina statements that they were in fact generating and capturing 100% of that wet slip revenue, because of the lack of documentation, we relied upon the marina's billings, the wet slip worksheets prepared by the marina, as well as historical satellite imagery to determine the amount of boats present at the marina on a given point, and, as well as the number of customers that were billed at that given period. We relied on several satellite providers for historical satellite imagery, and within that imagery we used numerous types of angles and positions, magnification to accurately determine and assess how many boats were or were not at the marina on a given point. There were some satellite images that we considered unusable because of the darkness, blurriness, or other items within those imageries. We also excluded certain vessels that appeared to have been docked at the fuel docks or otherwise that did not appear to be part of the marina's rental operations. And we also performed detailed reconciliations between all the data sets that the city had, as well as that the marina had, to ensure that we were capturing 100% of what had been billed in that appropriate month. We also considered transient rentals within our analysis and slips that were being rented, but those boats may not have been present at the marina during the given intervals. Here is that same satellite overview of the marina, and just to kind of give you an example of how we can go in and precisely determine that. Here is of that same image, a magnified view and different angle of that, and you can clearly tell distinguishing boat features and trace those back to what has been billed. Here's another angle of that again shows very detailed imagery of the marina. As far as the total conclusion on the wet slips, we identified variances between the boats that we identified as being using the marina on a given point, and we had 8 measurement points during the period of review, and we compared those to the billed customers, and we identified that there was on average 4 wet slip customers that were not being billed on a monthly basis. This resulted in the city losing approximately $56,000 in lost revenue from the wet slips. Because of the lack of documentation maintained by the marina, we were unable to determine the precise causes of the reasons for those losses. Within the dry storage area, the property is secured by a fence with 2 entry gates. One of those is for the marina, and one of those is for the Public Works Department. They're secured by a keypad entry system. That gate code is the same gate code for everyone, whether you be a transit customer, employee, and that gate code is rarely changed by marina staff. The gates are also occasionally left open overnight, which that combined with the gate codes could allow unauthorized individuals access to the marina. Different types of boats, trailers, RVs, non-motorized boats such as kayaks and canoes use the dry storage spaces at the marina. If you go down to the marina operations, there's no well-distinguished spaces for the dry storage users, and partial of the rationale for that is they are constantly moving boats and trailers and RVs around to accommodate as many dry storage users as possible. Very similar to the wet slips, they don't have any physical, the marina doesn't have any physical counts documented that would allow us to go back through and confirm that yes, there's this number of boats or customers present at a given point at the marina. They do go through and mark the trailer hitches of the trailers and the boats to signify this is trailer or boat relates to so-and-so customer. but very similar to the wet slips, they don't go back through and compare those names to what is actually being billed on any given month. And they were provided the same comment that they essentially know when stuff shows up because of the size of the marina. Again, this is going to be very similar to the wet slips. We relied upon various billings, historical satellite imagery within our analysis. Some of the kayaks and canoes, they are stored on a storage rack that allows for multiple kayaks and canoes to be stored on that. And because of the level of satellite imagery, we excluded those because we weren't able to accurately determine how many of those kayaks or canoes or smaller vessels were present at the marina from this satellite imagery. So we excluded that count as well as the billings from analysis. And very similar to the wet slips, we relied on various imagery angles and positions and excluded images that we deemed to be unusable in our analysis. Based off our conversations with the marina staff, we excluded certain boats and trailers that were attached to vehicles that may not have been utilizing the dry storage areas on those measurement points. And we again performed detailed reconciliations between all of the data that was available to us and considered transient rentals and boats and trailers that were outside of the fenced area that because of occupancy issues were located outside of the marina gates. Again, here's that same satellite overview, and you can tell through the magnification of that and the different angles that we can go through and precisely determine the amount of boats and trailers that were being used at the marina or placed at the marina. Here's another angle of that precise image. Within the dry storage conclusion, again, we've identified variances between the actual number and the billed number of customers. This resulted in an average of 14 to 18 dry storage customers that weren't being billed on a monthly basis and resulted in approximately $80,000 to $103,000 in lost revenue over that 44-month time period of our review. Regarding the late fees for both the wet slips and the dry storage areas, fees for the dry storage and the wet slip areas are required to be paid before the 15th of every month. The finance department, in our discussions with them, they had notated to us that they continually had to remind marina staff to assess late fees to the marina customers. So during the performance of our analytics, we identified that out of the total fees that could have been assessed, late fees that could have been assessed to marina customers, only 11% of those customers were actually assessed late fees. Part of this was due to an informal late fee policy that was established by the former finance director, and he essentially requested that the marina staff do not assess any late fees until those customers had become 3 months in arrears. But there were still issues even beyond that with assessing late fees. And looking at the assessed late fees, that 11% that was assessed, only 33% of that total was actually collected by the marina and by the city. A large portion of that was the marina appeared to arbitrarily waive or remove late fees upon payment of the past due invoices. Without considering the informal late fee policy, this resulted in at least $33,000 in lost revenue to the city, just considering the first month in arrears, not considering any subsequent months. Regarding our finding on the fuels, there's essentially 5 areas that we'll discuss and go into greater detail on. The first of those is the fuel sales and transfers. The marina does provide unleaded and diesel fuel sales to marina customers. In reviewing the sales price per gallons that were sold to marina customers, we identified 28 exceptions where marina customers were not charged the similar or comparable price per gallon as other customers on the same day or in the same time period. With these 28 exceptions, this resulted in an additional $1,634 in lost revenue. The marina's fuel pump system is a little antiquated. It doesn't allow for any types of prepayments of fuel or credit card holds. Essentially, in order to pump fuel off the marina, you have to go inside the ship store, ask for the pump to turn on, return to the pump your fuel, and then go back inside and pay. So there was a number of people that would pump the fuel and didn't have the ability to pay for whatever reason, or didn't pay at the date of that the sale was actually transacted on. And so there was numerous sales on account, including the now former marina manager, that had to be collected on by marina staff. The city does purchase fuel for its equipment and vehicles via fuel cards issued by the city. One exception to that is for the fire department's jet skis. Those are allowed to be refilled at the marina. But in our review of the journal ledgers, we identified several other departments, including the marina itself, had utilized the marina's fuel system to pump fuel for its equipment or vehicles. There was also a general lack of review of those inter-department transfers and sign-offs on those. Within the fuel inventory, there is provided, because of the numerous types of repurchases at the marina for the fuel, there's provided a bulk purchase order for the fuels for both, or for all three of the city's fuel vendors at the beginning of the fiscal year. And each time the city or the marina goes through and requests more fuel, they'll obtain verbal fuel quotes from each one of the fuel vendors, and based upon the fuel quotes provided, they'll then order from the lowest fuel vendor. They document those fuel quotes on requisition forms that are typically, according to city's purchasing policies and procedures, are required to be completed before an order is placed. In most cases, we identified that the requisition forms were completed after the fuel had been ordered, had been delivered, and had been invoiced by that fuel vendor. There are several instances of the fuel quotes provided on the requisition forms and not lining up with the rates per gallons listed on those fuel invoices. There were certain issues raised regarding fuel in other areas by the finance department surrounding the marina operations. In several cases, the finance department stated to us, and this was subsequently confirmed by available emails that were provided, that they were essentially requested to defer to the former city manager, or to the marina management by the former city manager, Shane Crawford. And so this prevented some of those instances of follow-up at the marina. There was a lack of precise fuel readings and documentation regarding the fuel deliveries by the marina staff. And one of the comments that they had made to us during the interviews was that they can account for every drop of fuel at the marina because of the implementation of the best fuel management system available. Despite of those statements, the finance department staff had indicated to us that there was reconciliation issues within the fuel inventory reconciliations between what they would calculate the expected inventory balance to be versus what it actually was. And in some cases, those variances were significant. There was some limited attempts to address those reconciliation issues. Some statements and some reasons for that was provided, but never necessarily jived, and no further follow-up was really done by the city to, or by the marina to address those reconciliation issues. We subsequently performed our own fuel inventory recalculations, and two of the significant variances that we identified, we traced through and identified that there was two separate instances where a fuel vendor had essentially duplicate billed the city for the same order, and this resulted in a little over $27,000 in overbilled fuel expenditures that was subsequently paid by the city. There was also several other fuel fluctuations within our calculations, but because of the lack of documentation, we were unable to determine the causes for those fluctuations.
That overpayment of $27,000 was paid to the city from the vendor, so the city recovered it.
Within the marina, they do provide fuel discounts, and those discounts are listed there for you, and those discounts are per gallon. In our review of the fee schedules that are approved by the Board of Commissioners, we noticed that there was a lack of authorization prior to the most recent fee ordinance that was adopted on June 12th of 2018. This was subsequently confirmed by the city clerk's research and confirming that there was no authorization for these type of discounts prior to that fee ordinance adopted on June 12th of 2018. During the period of review from February 1st of 2015 through June 12th of 2018, this resulted in approximately $327,000 in unauthorized fuel discounts that were provided by the marina, but were not authorized by the Board of Commissioners. Despite of that, we also did some additional analytical procedures on the fuel discounts, and we determined that over 90% of the marina customers received at least one discount. Almost 29% received 2 discounts. There was also numerous overrides of the discount rates of the 5 cent or the 20 cent per gallon rates. And when asked how the marina documents that eligibility, they were essentially stated that they know who qualifies. Most of the marina customers regarding fuel are regular customers, so they know if they're a commercial customer or if they have a Boat US or CTO discount. And going over the override air rates, we identified that a little over 1.65% was an error on the 50 or overridden on the 50-gallon discounts, almost 3% on the Boat US discounts, and a little over 13% on the commercial discounts. And these are just overrides. This resulted in approximately $11,000 in lost revenue to the city. Because of the lack of documentation, the only fuel discount that we were actually able to test the eligibility on was the 50-plus gallon discount. We identified that almost 38% of those that received the 50-plus gallon discount were not eligible for that discount. And this is in addition to that previous error of 1.65%, and resulted in another $5,000 in lost revenue. One distinction I do want to make here is that $11,000 and $5,000 number is not in addition to that previous number of $327,000. Because of the overlapping time frames, we did not, and because of time constraints, we did not bifurcate the numbers, but a substantial amount of this $11,000 and $5,000 is covered in that $327,000 there. But we felt it important to notate these discount errors to the city. Even though the marina staff had indicated to us that there's no special favors or deals or discounts of any kind to city staff or to anyone else for that matter, we reviewed the available credit card receipts that were available to us, and we identified at least 67 fuel sales to marina employees, including the now former marina manager, a marina supervisor, and 2 marine assistants. Within those 67 fuel sales, we identified 48 out of those 67, those discount rates provided to these marina employees exceeded the maximum discount rate of 30 cents per gallon. And looking at some of the discounts provided to these marina employees, either by fellow marina employees or by the marina employees themselves, we identified situations where some of the marina employees were receiving commercial discounts, sometimes 2 or 3 commercial discounts, which will result in 60 cents or 40 cents off per gallon. For those type of discounts, and they resulted in approximately $252 in questionable fuel discounts to the marina employees. Within the boat launch ramp fees, it's essentially conducted by the marina as an honor system. They hope people are honest. They hope people will come in and pay the required fees. They don't go out and do any type of daily checks or verification that everybody that has utilized the boat launch ramp has indeed paid the required fees. Part of this, the marina staff indicated to us, was because of the lack of manpower, especially on busy days, to do those daily checks or verification. The boat launch ramp is also not visible from the ship store. And looking at the annual fees for the boat launch ramp, they did not increase as we would expect or what we've seen in other marinas. And in fact, they're actually decreasing as a percentage of the total marina operating revenue. So if you were to compare the fiscal year 2015 percentage rate compared to the year-to-date fiscal year 2018, that would result in at least $1,700 in lost revenue. I do want to make a notation here that this number is not notated within our final conclusion. The reason for that is because of that lack of documentation and lack of information, we weren't able to adequately, in our opinion, adequately determine the total lost revenue during that time frame, and that's the reason why it was excluded from our overall conclusion. On the ship store sales, they do provide a variety of merchandise, tackle sales, snacks and drinks, that type of thing at the marina. They typically try to keep 20 to 30% margins on those goods, but they do not keep any type of perpetual inventory system. In other words, if we were to go in there today, they wouldn't be able to tell us how many items of X goods do they have at the marina on that given day. or historically back. There's also only inventory counts done at fiscal year end, no other type of verification on that. They also pretty much record all of the ship store sales underneath ship store income. And so because of the similar rates among some of the items, we weren't able to identify what type of items were sold at the marina. But just looking from a overview of the ship store operations, most of the actual gross profit at the ship stores was within the stated gross profit margins, and that led us to the conclusion that the majority of the ship store sales were being captured at the marina. Similar to the fuel sales to the marina employees, we identified other purchases and rentals to marina employees at the marina that totaled over $10,000 in purchases. Because of what I just mentioned regarding the tracking of sales and the inventory, we weren't unable to determine whether the marina employees received any type of discounts or charge themselves for the correct quantity of goods within their ship store sales. Some of the internal control recommendations, we've recommended 25 of this for the city to implement at the marina operations. Some of these recommendations are going to simply require time investment by the city, maybe some additional staff and doing some additional training at the marina at the city level, implementing new policies and procedures. Some of these are going to potentially require capital or monetary investments in operational cameras, new fuel systems, potentially new accounting systems, and that can be undertaken by the city and the Board of Commissioners as they deem necessary. During the performance of our initial procedures, we were asked by the city to expand our initial objectives to include analysis of a demolition of a non-city owned property. These demolition services were identified through irregular expenditures discovered by the city clerk's office via some public records requests. And this property is located adjacent to the marina and is owned by entities owned by Mr. Holton, and so we'll refer to this as the Holton property. These funds were expended for the improvement or lease of that property from Mr. Holton. And here is a satellite overview. You can see the marina down in this section here. You can see the Holton property right here. And within this red box there, you can see that there appears to be a building, some other structures, miscellaneous items on the Holton property. 1 year later, after these expenditures had occurred, you can see that that building has been removed and cleaned up. These property expenditures occurred in 2014 and 2015. The property was used for events hosted in part by the city and by the marina. And all of these expenditures were approved by the former city manager, Shane Crawford. Within the city's purchasing policies and procedures and other documents, a city manager's authority, including the current city manager, is limited to $15,000 in approving purchases. Any purchase that's in excess of $1,000 is required to be under competitive selection, and any purchases in excess of $15,000 is required to go out for a bid. Several of the purchases that were identified through the public records request appear to fall within the city manager's $15,000 approval level, and so we do not consider those purchases within our analysis. Based upon the available documentation and the available emails to us, we were able to determine that there appeared to be a verbal agreement between the former city manager, Shane Crawford, the city, and Mr. Holton and his entities regarding the demolition of the fish ice house that's located on the Holton property, or was located on the Holton property. The demolition services of Cross Construction Services were provided and sole sourced by Cross Construction Services, and the total demolition cost totaled $39,000. Of that $39,000, the city paid the lion's share of that, almost $24,000, and Mr. Holton paid the remaining cost. Within just this fish ice house demolition services, we identified that there was no competitive quotes or solicitation for the demolition related services, and all of the requisition forms that were signed off on by the former city manager were dated after the services had been provided and after the services had been invoiced to the city. There was no apparent approval from the Board of Commissioners for the city manager to exceed his $15,000 authority or to sole source the construction services or demolition services of Cross Construction Services. This was subsequently confirmed by research performed by the city clerk. In a related email, related expenditures, the former city manager stated that we can't keep shoveling out these invoices somebody's going to get a hold of it. In fact, one already has. There was also another contract or verbal agreement for the city managing the operations at the Holton property for $400 a month, and there was no Board of Commissioner approval for that management. As far as our overall conclusion of our forensic examination, we identified that there was limited oversight of the marina operations by the city. There was a general disregard for purchasing policies and procedures by the marina, and this was all in part caused by the tone at the top set by the former city manager, Mr. Shane Crawford, and the marina management. When we talk about tone at the top, that essentially refers to the ethical atmosphere that's set by a management team, whether that be a government enterprise or a private enterprise. So if management is going to set the tone that everything needs to be above board, everything needs to be done within the bounds of our authority, that will eventually disseminate throughout the entire organization to the lowest levels, and that will likely be done by those employees and lower level management. However, if you communicate and have an attitude that, these purchasing policies and procedures, they don't necessarily apply to me. I know what's best for the city. I know that so-and-so is going to provide the best services at the best rates, so I'm going to bypass the competitive selection process, or whatever the rationale for that, whether it be good or bad. That has an effect that will disseminate throughout the city and have a negative tone at the top that will cause eventually all of the city to not essentially care about the purchasing policies and procedures, and they may operate outside of that because they see that example set by management. As far as total losses, we identified that approximately $550,000 were lost by the marina during the period of review. Two substantial areas was the unauthorized fuel discounts as well as the rental operations at the marina. Again, there was other fuel errors of approximately $16,000. Those losses are not in addition to that $550,000, but we felt important to notate those error rates and error losses to the city. As far as subsequent events, as Glenn kind of chimed in a little earlier, there was, once we released our draft report to the city officials, or to the city management, there was an investigation, subsequent recovery of the full $27,000 in overbilled fuel expenditures. Those were actually credits sitting on the fuel vendor's books, and so those were easily be obtained and reimbursed to the city. The city management has also already implemented a review and revision of a lot of the policies and procedures and recommendations that we had notated in our report, and based off of our conversations with city management, they're definitely making great strides in changing the tone at the top and disseminating that throughout the city. It's not something that's going to be changed overnight, but they still have made great efforts in that. I do at this point want to thank all the city employees that assisted us in the process, whether through interviews, document gathering, or whatever the case was. We do appreciate all the help. We couldn't have done this without you. And we also appreciate the city for allowing us to present this to you. And we do want to extend a special appreciation to Mr. Evans and Mr. Pierce for their assistance. They've been very receptive to our findings. As I mentioned, they've already started a review and revision of a lot of the recommendations that we've put into our report. And that's not something in our experience that we always see. And so that should be very encouraging to the city. So that's the end of our presentation. So if you all have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Mr. Kincaid, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you remember when you were first notified for this audit?
We were contacted in early June of 2018. We had sent out a draft engagement letter to the city around that time frame, but we weren't actually engaged, if you will, or the engagement letter wasn't signed until the end of July, and within about 1 to 2 weeks, we were on site in order to perform our initial procedures.
And do you remember who initiated it?
That request actually came through our business development executive for Carwiggs and Ingram. He referred the city manager's office to us, and we had that initial conversation with Mr. Evans, Mr. Pierce, and the county manager in June 2018.
Okay. Now, when you talk about forensic audit, forensic is embezzlement, criminal activity, fraud. What exactly did you finally come up with? I mean, is there some type of criminal activity? Okay, thank you.
Sorry. The term forensic is commonly associated with investigating criminal activity, and in fact, in many cases, that's what it is. But in accounting, it can also be referred to measure compliance, to look for mismanagement, to look for negligence, to look for non-compliance with things. So it doesn't necessarily mean a criminal issues involved. In this particular case, and I have a very strong background in law enforcement, I was a deputy sheriff for many years, and from what I have seen in this, based on our information, I don't see anything that has risen to the level of a criminal offense.
Okay.
That's just my personal opinion. For a determination on that, you may want to refer this report to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department because they have subpoena authority and things where they could find other information, but we couldn't. It might change that. But from what I can see, this does not appear to be a criminal matter to me.
Okay. Another thing too is that, you know, Dave Marzcano, he was the director of the Marina for 17 years. He did a fantastic job. I don't care what anyone else says. He did do a good job. And the fact of the matter is, if he was approached and questioned or even given suggestions how to do a better job at the Marina, I'm sure he would have been open about it. Had anyone approached him to tell him that this is what we can do to improve the way you do business at the Marina, keep the receipts, about the rentals, the late fees, some kind of program, software, whatever, anything suggested to him to help him do a better job down there?
We did not make that suggestion at the time we came in. We were just working for the commissioners in looking at the issues as they existed. So we did not have any discussions with him at all.
Well, to clarify, we did have interviews with Mr. Marzcano, and we did extend during our initial field work, conversation that we're not necessarily out to get anyone. We're essentially looking for compliance ways to improve the internal controls, and that wasn't communicated to, I would go and say practically everybody that we talked to, including Board of Commissioners. And so, it wasn't something that, when we go into these things, where we go into an unbiased manner, we don't look at any gossips or anything of that nature. We merely consider the facts. And that's what we did, and that's why in our forensic examination report, we believe we're unbiased and we're strictly listing out the facts as we observe them.
Okay, thank you.
I have just a quick suggestion for the city manager. Is there some way that we can put this on another agenda and break it out of things that I found in here that I would like to see addressed, like say a non-resident resident rate? Just things that don't involve the auditors, but things that we could talk about as far as the fee schedule go and other things?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, if I may, one of the things that we will be bringing back to the Board of Commissioners is a corrective action plan to address the items that are contained in the findings, but also when we bring back our fee ordinance for discussion. We've had some conversations, some very productive conversations with Marina staff, and one of the things they have articulated, excuse me, was the desire for a resident, non-resident rate, et cetera, or discounted rate. So that's something that will come back before this board for further discussions.
Question, Mr. City Manager. In your opinion, how long will it take for the city to get the Marina and to implement those 25 recommendations from the audit team and get it in good operating shape?
We've had some very productive conversations from the Marina staff. I have begun going over there to meet with the operational staff of all the divisions there on a weekly basis, so I'm updated pretty consistently. We've also deployed one of our financial analysts there to assist with the financial transactions. We've already started the process in making some of the changes. I would think that by your February workshop, we will begin having a couple of items that we effectively can say we checked the box, and then other items that there is going to require some additional monies to see come to fruition. I think in its entirety, most of the things contained in the audit should be able to be resolved within a 6 to 8 month period, if not sooner. There is some low-hanging fruit, and staff has made the changes and is working with finance to ensure that there's compliance, there's two-person verification, and then ultimately looking at some of our software and additional training for staff so they can be successful. But I would say probably in about a 6 to 8 month period, I think we'd be substantially better than we are today.
Thank you.
Do we have any idea what the costs will be to implement those changes?
That's something that we will bring back forward. We have to price out some of the costs. Staff is looking at some costs for some technology improvements and reaching back to some of our vendors. So right now it's too premature for us to know, but we should have some hard numbers for the board in February.
For the audit team, please. You stated at least twice during this that, you know, you didn't have all the documentation that you needed to look into everything. That being the case, if you had all the documentation, would you assume that the losses would be higher or lower, or what would be, it's a guess, I understand, since you don't have the doc, but I just want to kind of get your feel for what you think.
That would be a reasonable assumption that if we had additional documentation that the losses could have been higher had we had certain documentation. A prime example of that would be on the boat launch ramp fees. As I mentioned during the presentation, we didn't consider those just because of the lack of information available to us. And when we put the numbers into a report, we want to make sure that those are accurate and defensible numbers, and that's what we believe we provided you with. So it's very likely that that might be the lower end of potential losses.
Can you, on that same note of the boat launch fees, you referred to this graphic of the percentage of increase in your overall revenue for the time, and in here it says that they were consistently referenced to the city of Gulfport, and then you have the Gulfport's chart, and Gulfport's chart is a lot higher than ours. So I didn't know why we were referencing that, and how do these two collate as far as that goes?
So essentially what we wanted to look at, and this is what the commissioner is referring to,
it's on
is
page 28
and 29 of the forensic examination report. And there's two tables there that she's referencing. So we went in with the expectation that the fee percentages would maintain a consistent percentage, whether that be 1%, 0.5%, that every year you would expect 0.5% of the total operating revenue would be related to the ramp. Now, as you know, fuel sales go up, as rentals go up, we would expect that number to fall in line as far as revenue would increase at the same rate as the rest of the operations. And we did not see that. And because Marina Management consistently referenced the city of Gulfport to essentially substantiate our assumption and expectation, we looked at the city of Gulfport's numbers and just looking at the ramp fees compared to the total operating income. And within the city of Gulfport, you can see that it went from 1.01% to 0.92% to 0.99% to 0.99%. So it was very consistent compared to what we were seeing within the marina operations. We didn't do additional analytics to say, well, the reason why they weren't generating as much revenue because we didn't compare boat launch ramp fees, but we were just using that to substantiate our assumption that those boat launch ramp fees should maintain a consistent percentage, even though they weren't.
where they haven't, in Madeira Beach. Okay, thank you.
I have another question in regards to the fuel. In reading the report, it stated that if they had X amount of gallons left in the tank and the next tanker came in and filled it up and the price was higher, they tried to use the old rate versus what the new rate is, you know. And I guess I've never seen anything like that, because you look at the gas stations, as soon as the new fuel comes in, there goes the new price. Have you guys ever seen that before, that they would try to hold and say, oh, we got 100 gallons left, or 200 gallons, or 2,000, whatever it is, and we're going to keep it at the old price till we get down to that, unless they're out there continuously monitoring how many gallons are left? We don't have a strong, you know, understanding.
We've seen both. I mean, honestly, it depends on the type of operations. If it's, a popular gas station and they're constantly bringing fuel in, yes, as soon as that, fuel is dropped in, they're going to change the price because that fuel is being used so quickly. In a smaller operation, the fuel may not be used as quickly. It's, we've seen where, they don't change it until, they think that they've used up all the old inventory. But, that depends on management.
Thank you.
Whoops. I don't really have any questions, but I'd like to make a couple comments if I might. We really left a lot of money on the table this time, over $500,000 at $567,000 within a three and a half year period. And I know it's just almost not incomprehensible, but it's just really sad for me. But I'm really glad that the Board of Commissioners ordered, this audit when we did. It's been talked about for so many years, and I think that we're moving forward now. It was an expensive lesson, but on a happier note, the audit that we thought was going to cost us $50,000 actually just cost $22,000 due to that credit of $27,000 that was uncovered by you all during your findings. So, and that $27,000, as you said, Mr. Gilliard, has already been refunded to the city, and we saw that in our documentation. I really think that $22,338.87 spent on this audit may be the best money spent by our city checkbook since we incorporated in 1947, and I really mean that. I think it was an excellent decision. I know we've lost credibility probably with clients and with the clients of the marina and our citizens, but I really think that we'll be able to get that back. I think that the credibility will be there. A lot of our folks did say that we were, or some of our citizens said that we were on a witch hunt. I think that's unfortunate. We've gone past that. So that's over with. I personally am glad that Mr. Moscano resigned when he did, actually. I think that he had a good thing going when he was here. I don't mind saying that. I think he'd feel that he did. And he treated a lot of our city business and our city taxpayer money, I reckon, like it was his own. I guess what y'all said about the tone at the top is just very, very important. And I feel very comfortable and very good that we have our city manager and accounting manager to follow through on these recommendations and make sure that we're on a straighter track. And I think that we will be. And that's all I got to say.
Well, I'd just like to say audits are a part of running any kind of a business, especially a cash business. And then I'm sure we will recover any money spent on it by correcting the deficiencies. So it was a good thing, ultimately.
I had one more comment about it because I got the remaining balances on what the marina owes the city for the building and for the docks. And it's pretty substantial. And that $550,000 would have gone a long way over those 3 years in helping to pay down this debt back to the city and, basically get the marina out of debt to the city. Mm-hmm. So that would have been a huge chunk because one of them is $320,000 and the other one has a balance of $487,000. So it wouldn't have paid it off, but it would have been a good hit for it.
Right. Any more discussion from the board?
I did have one more question. Sorry. The ship store business operated at between a 17 and a 27% profit. How, if it was any other business out there in the world, and they had to pay rent, they had to pay employees, they had to pay taxes, they had to pay the utility bills, they would have sunk. How do we correct this? I know raising the prices is how you have to do that, so I understand that. But I don't understand how we got in the hole by just charging a 17 to 27% markup on products and trying to run it as a business, as an enterprise?
Well, for anyone who may not be that familiar, sales minus your cost of goods sales equals your gross profit. And then from your gross profit is reduced all your expenses. So when your gross profit is low, you have very little room for expenses in order to break even or make any income. The only way you can do that is to either A, as you said, sir, raise prices, or B, manage those costs. Perhaps you might be able to buy your inventory at a cheaper rate and try and lower that cost of goods sold. But it's certainly something that you want to take a look at, because you're absolutely right. It should not be a cost center, it should be a profit center.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, with regards to the findings and the information contained in the report, it is staff's desires to move very swiftly to address the information that's contained and bring forward a comprehensive plan that the Board of Commissioners can consider at your next workshop in February. We see this as an opportunity for us to correct some things that we know need to correct and work with the existing staff to provide them opportunities and training necessary so they can be successful in their endeavors. We've had very productive conversations with staff. The lines of communication are fully open, and we're confident with everyone that's involved in the process to address the elements contained in the report is committed to making sure we don't find ourselves in this predicament in the next couple of years. So you have my commitment, you have the commitment of staff that this is a priority for us, and we look forward to the opportunity of looking back 6 to 8 months from now to see the progress that we've made at the marina operation. It is a treasured and valuable resource for the city. We're very fortunate to have such a great asset in our community, and we're going to work with the team to make sure that the patrons, the residents, and the folks that visit the marina on a daily basis know that they have an entity that supports good management, good oversight, and putting the policies in place, because that's most importantly what we were able to identify as part of the findings contained, is that there wasn't a lot of policies in place and not enough training to ensure that the employees are successful in their endeavors. So we're going to support the employees, give them the opportunity to be successful and stay attuned to what's going on. And obviously there's certain elements that come with a price tag, but we'll discuss that with the board in February.
Anything else from the board? Well, I would like to thank Mr. Kincaid and Mr. Gilliard very much. It's quite an undertaking, and you provided us with a lot of reading. Thank you. Next on the agenda is, I'm sorry? Oh, I know, public comment. But before I open the floor for public comment, which we will do shortly, as you know, public comment is that only, it's comment. And I know some of you, probably quite a few of you, have questions about the audit. So in the spirit of transparency and in the interest of public concern about the recent audit of the marina, I'd like to ask for a vote and a motion to suspend the rules regarding how public meetings are to be conducted. The motion would be to allow the public to ask questions regarding the audit by submitting written questions to be read into the record and then subsequently answered. Do I have a motion or discussion?
I would make that motion to have individuals individually complete a card or a piece of paper with their name, address, and what? And the question, okay, right?
And by suspending the normal rules.
Okay, by suspending our normal rules.
No, second.
Will the city clerk please call the
I
roll?
think it's important to note too that you would still allow public comment after those question
Yes,
cards.
absolutely.
So first question cards and then regular public
Right.
comment.
So you're saying that there's going to still be public comment with the
Yes.
questions? So just because they put out a card out with the question on, they can still have the opportunity to come up and make their comments?
Right,
Just wanna
I
make
think we're
sure.
going to do the questions by card, so we don't go too much back and forth. They ask the question by card and they'll get an answer. If they have more than one question, they can fill out more than one card. Once those questions are all answered, then public can comment maybe on the answers or whatever they want to. They can get up and speak directly during the public comment for 3 minutes.
Mayor, just pardon me just a minute, but in line with what the city attorney said, do we put a time limit on that, like they do at a lot of other different question and answer sessions?
There'll be no time limit for the questions,
A
whatever
time
questions.
limit for the
are-
entire, I mean,
Whatever-
just,
Whatever
I don't know.
questions are asked will get answered.
okay, whatever.
Madam Mayor, just for clarification procedurally, so you would like for individuals to, are you going to have a set time where individuals are to submit their cards, and after that set time, there's no more cards submitted?
Correct.
Okay.
We will, well, let's get the motion approved, and I'll explain how we'll go forward. Well,
You made the
City
motion,
Clerk call
I
the roll
seconded
then.
it. Okay,
Vice Mayor Weinstein?
yes.
Commissioner Oakley?
Yes.
Commissioner Douthat?
Yes.
Commissioner Hodges?
Yes.
Mayor Black?
Yes. So the cards will be available at the back of the room on the table, if you haven't already filled out, I saw some did. Please submit the cards to the city clerk, and there'll be only one question per card, and each card should also include your home address and name. And we will, let's see, we're going to take a break for 10 minutes while you fill out the cards. Then after we reconvene, Kurt Pricer, our Chief Information Officer, he will answer the questions in no particular order, and they will be answered by the applicable parties. If there are multiple cards with the same question, he will decide which card to read. And you must be present for your card to be read. So now we will adjourn for 10 minutes, and we will return and open the floor for public comment. Well, we'll return after 10 minutes and have public comment on the audit, and then we will ask the questions.
No, we're going to
Madam
do the
Mayor.
questions first and then
Was
the
that
public comment
the other
after.
way?
They can save their public comment for the end.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, procedurally, before the board takes any official legislative action, they have to allow for an opportunity for the board, the public to opine on the action before the vote.
All right, thank you for the legal advice. All right, we'll open this up for public comment on this. Go ahead.
You lost the mic.
That one works.
This one works? Amazing. Robert Preston, 425 South Bayshore Drive, Madeira Beach. I think that not allowing additional cards is an error on your part, because as you answer questions to, or have replies to the questions of those cards, it will also generate other comments or questions along the way. So what you're doing by saying no more cards after they're turned in is you're stifling any valuable input from the public. Thank you.
I think we'll look for cards continuously through the card thing. If some cards get answered and you have another card you want to turn in, just turn that card in.
I think that'll be fine.
Yeah, that would work.
John Hendricks, 569 Normandy Road, Madeira Beach. A couple of things I wanted to point out. A lot of what I saw on this audit were a question of training with the people in the marina. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things we need to get going is a training program. And you've got obsolete equipment down there. I know for a fact on that because I went there to buy gas one day. They were having so much trouble with the register and the credit card and whatnot. I actually had to go to the ATM to get money to pay for my fuel. You know, you've got beg your pardon? A little louder, I'm about to swallow this thing, Debbie. The other thing is that Commissioner Weinstein brought up Mr. Marsicano. Mr. Marsicano did a great job. Mr. Marsicano was away from the marina quite a bit of the time. Part of the problem is that we didn't have a marina director as such because he was a marina director city supervisor. He was all over this city. And really, it's kind of a fault of the commission and previous commissioners in consolidating what these people are doing. Dave didn't have time to be there overseeing a lot of this stuff that went on the marina because his job was consolidated. And you can't have a marina director do his proper job if you've also got him down on 140th or wherever trying to help them scrape oysters out of an overflow, or being down on the beach taking care of stuff because they've got problems. But it was all of this consolidation of jobs that we went through where we lost the expertise and the oversights of one of our major departments in this city. And I think you really need to look at getting a marina director and getting a city supervisor like we used to have before they got run off by some in this commission. So you're stretching these people too thin. And it looked to me like the biggest thing you needed was some training going on down there. A lot of these discounts that were given to people probably because of problems they were having with equipment and everything else. It's really hard to deal with it down there on some of these antiquated systems you got, including that fuel pump. Thank you.
Reese.
A new microphone, eh? Reese Noren, 363 Medallion Boulevard, still your closest neighbor. I noticed in the card system designed for public comment and questions, I did not see any way for those with disabilities to submit their items. Unfortunately, I have lost the control of my fingers and I'm not able to write. And I realize I'm a very small minority, but I don't see anything offered for those with disabilities to be able to put input into these particular proceedings, which have been provided for other proceedings, but not this one. Thank you.
Chairman, I recommend if he can't write that he be allowed to come up and orally present his questions, since
Or
he's
would it be
handicapped.
appropriate for him to give his comments to the city clerk to write down?
Or they could do that way either, but he is handicapped, so some reasonable accommodation.
Okay.
Steve Kochik, 15301 2nd Street, East Madeira Beach. I was very disappointed to see this happen at a workshop. People are working, they don't have the opportunity to come. I thought this would be definitely for a meeting, for a regular meeting at night. The other thing is, I don't know whether this can be accepted. Are you allowed to make motions and do things at a workshop? I thought a workshop was strictly discussion and getting consensus of things to go on, whether any official votes can be taken today or not. But once again, the residents, and one of the most important issues that we have before us, you ignore the residents and you do it for your own convenience, or just to hide it from the residents so that they won't see it, and now you'll be able to put your spin on it. Do you ever think of the residents that possibly they would be very interested in coming and hearing directly from the auditors of what the issues were, so that they can ask the questions, so that they can find out what was going on and all? And, the audit was a lot of estimates and maybes and could have happened and all. And I wish there would have been a little thought as to that process. Thank you.
Yes.
Bill Henning, 503 150th Avenue. Question for the auditors. Total
If you have questions for the auditors, this is the time to do that, is by filling out the card. This is simply for public comment.
Let me just comment
Okay.
then, okay? Fuel sales have exploded.
Can you just talk more into the mic?
Fuel sales have exploded at the marina. Everybody's focused on the 500,000, 300,000 of unauthorized discounts, lost revenue. How much revenue did those discounts generate? It's easy to figure out, to come up with a number of, quote, unauthorized discounts, come up with a number of what those discounts generated in profit. Poor audit.
He can't come back.
One more comment.
City attorney, is he allowed to return?
If he has any time left, I believe that the clock says 3 minutes.
I just reset it, I'm sorry, it was one minute.
One more comment. How much money do you spend chasing $10?
All right, thank you for the comment.
New system for cards. For what kind of loss?
Thank you.
Well, let me say first of all, many of us for the last 17 years have wondered
Please
why
state your name and address.
Sorry, Marvin Merrill, 581 Crystal
Thank you,
Drive.
Marvin.
Thank you. Many of us have wondered for the last 17 years why we really made a profit at the marina, and I think that's been answered. But I want to say first of all that I want to commend the city manager and the 3 commissioners and the mayor for voting to spend that $50,000. I've been here for a number of years, and that's probably the best $50,000 this city has ever spent. You can't help but go through if you read all 29 pages, page after page after page, they can say what they want about management. It's just mismanagement, just page after page. And when people raise a question, well, why did we let so-and-so go, or why did he resign? Just please read those 29 pages. There was $550,000 identified as lost revenue. And the commission's asking, well, how are we going to pay for this? Well, for gosh sakes, if we can turn it around and start bringing in that kind of money in the future years, there won't be any problem with money. And on top of that, if you take that $550,000 and look back the last 10 years or so and say chances are something like that has been happening for the 10 or 15 years. So I think the auditing people did an excellent job, and certainly they're to be commended, and thanks for the effort they put into this. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, in that case, I believe we will now adjourn for 10 minutes so people can fill out the cards if they haven't already. And it is now 3:18.
still have questions you'd like to present, please write them down and get them to the clerk. In about 2 minutes, they'll resume.
.33. Please take your seats.
Madam Mayor, Mr. City Manager, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kurt Pricer. I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Madeira Beach. The way the process will work here, it looks like I've got, I'm guessing about 20 pieces of paper here, 20 questions that most likely are for the auditors, possibly some for the board as well. As stated by the mayor earlier on, you need to be present to have your question communicated. I'll ask, as long as I can read the names, and I apologize if I mispronounce the name, please correct me if I do. I'll read the name. If you just raise your hand if you're still here, and then I will read the question and there will be a response. That's the way the process is going to go this afternoon. Our first question is from J. Roger Pryor. Mr. Pryor is here. And the question, any reason why an audit, is there any reason why an audit should not be welcome if you are performing your business well and ethically? Did I get that question right, sir? That question is directed towards the auditors or toward the board, sir?
Well, personally, I would say that's sort of a redundant question, because you're right.
Moving on to our next question. Mr. Preston, Robert Preston is here. Thank you. What was total revenue for the marina minus the expenditures is what? Okay. Total revenue for the marina minus the expenditures is what? Is that correct, Mr. Preston? Okay.
I don't have those figures in front of us because we didn't take a overall analysis as far as that. We were more detailed focused. If you look at page 28 of the forensic examination report, there is a schedule that lists out the total operating revenue for the marina. In fiscal year 2015, it was just shy of $2 million and increased in fiscal year 2017 to a little more than $2.4 million. And then fiscal year to date, October through July, so you're missing a month there, it was close to $2.2 million in revenue. I do not have the operating expenses in front of me.
I'm not sure how it proceeds. I didn't hear you, Mr. President.
I know.
That's a question. I have the revenue figures for the last CAFR that was completed for 16-17, and the total operating revenues were $2,446,408, and the total expenses were $2,291,966. So the operating income was $154,442. When you subtract some miscellaneous expenses, the income over expenditures is $142,000. That's for just one fiscal year.
Thank you.
And that's from the audited financial statements.
That's per the FY 2017 CAFR.
Thank you. Our next question, again, from Mr. Preston. What do you, I believe this question is directed towards the board or the city manager. Is that correct, Mr. Preston? Correct. What are you going to do with the $17,850 Chief O'Neill stole from the marina?
With regards
It's
to,
not pertinent.
yeah, with regards to that particular question, I don't think it's germane to the conversation being had today. That item will be discussed at a later date.
Our next question is coming from Helen Price. Have I got that right? Oh. And from, let's see, how did the auditor miss the inappropriate fuel transfers done by non-marina, is that employees, ma'am? Non-marina employees.
We did not take an analysis of who should have found or anything like that nature. I will say that, in a general audit, when you're looking at smaller departments, you're not always looking at minor expenditures. There's materiality limits. I don't know if that factored into the city's external auditors' findings or whatnot.
There's slips of paper in the back of the room. Are we allowing people to? We allowing folks to supply additional questions on written questions? She wanted to follow up. I'm not sure how we are proceeding with this. Ralph?
Yeah, just turn in the card and put it in the bottom of the stack.
Our next question comes from Ms. Amy Verdensky. Thank you. Fuel discounts, I believe, are misconstrued as loss instead of promotion. Two things. What percentage of the $327,126 should be classified as advertising? How much business will be lost if we discontinue offering discounts?
We did not consider that as part of our procedures. If that's something the city or the Board of Commissioners wants us to take a look at, we can definitely do so, pending their authorization, but that was not part of our analytical procedures that we are authorized for.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, with regards to that question, I think it's more so to the point that the board on June of 2018 adopted a policy that allows for the fuel discounts. I believe the findings contained in the audit speak that there was no policy that was legislatively approved by the board to give the authorization to allow for that. And I think that's where the lost revenue opportunities for the city. It's not something that we as an organization would look to modify or go away from. It's just that there was no authorization that was granted to staff to offer those types of discounts. And the auditors can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Our next question is from Reese Noren. Mr. Noren is still here. We are provided 45 pages. My understanding is that the audit was 2,000 pages. The time allowed to ask questions does not permit a person to digest the audit in its entirety. Can we have additional meetings to question and appraise the findings of the auditors?
It's right here. We are. We are going to have additional meetings. That's what I brought up a while ago.
We are going to have additional meetings for staff to discuss the findings, but with respect to the auditors being present, that's not a continuation of their engagement.
True. Okay.
And just a further comment, I believe that all of this paper, not to mention the actual audit, this is the backup, is online for anyone to see.
That is correct.
And the entire package will be posted to a button on the front page of the website before close of business today. So it's very easy to find. Our next question is from Janet Wolf. Ms. Wolf, thank you. Due to the high amount of dollars found in the marina audit, should the issue be turned over to the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Department of Investigation for a criminal investigation? I'm reading that exactly as it was written.
I can address that. My understanding is that the report will be submitted to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department for their review, and it will be forwarded to the State Attorney's Office if they feel there's probable cause to indicate that a criminal offense has occurred.
Our next question is from Helen Price. Ms. Price is still here. Thank you. Were the auditors aware that employees paid for fuel with a discount so they could perform city work, such as moving the fireworks barge and placing swim buoys along the beach in a borrowed boat because our marina does not have a boat? I got that right, ma'am?
We were made aware of that. In fact, that was one of the comments. Our report, the draft form, was provided to the marina employees, including the former marina manager, and providing comments, and that was one of the example, and that is in page 27, the top of page 27, that is addressed in the report. Then there were no reimbursements requested by those marina employees for reimbursement of those expenditures.
And Madam Mayor, to follow up on that particular item, we have communicated with staff to inform that in the event that we need to secure a boat for city-related business and there's costs associated with this, please let us know. We'll take the appropriate processes to do that. We run the risk of running into liability if we utilize somebody else's vessel. So staff was doing things out of the goodness of their heart, and we understand that. And so we have told them that in the future, if they need things to effectively do things that are applicable to the daily operations of the public works or marina operation, let us know well in advance, and we'll secure the appropriate apparatus so they can do their job, so we don't find ourselves in situations like this in the future.
Our next question is from Janet Wolf. Thank you. Since more than $500,000 was found in auditing one department, does the city plan to audit other/all departments?
Could you please repeat the question, sir?
Since more than $500,000 was found in auditing one department, does the city plan to audit other/all departments?
One of the conversations that we had during the budget sessions is that we're going to look at auditing a lot of our cost centers throughout the city, looking at our parking revenue, anything that there is a monetary transaction for the city. That's things that we're going to look at with regards to the specificity and how granular we go into those audits. Those things are subject for discussion with the Board of Commissioners, and that's something that we'll have a more in-depth conversation with the board as to what is the next step, because one of the things we want to make sure is that we take the findings, we institute the findings, we check back and make sure we have effectively accomplished those findings and then move on from that point. We don't want to find ourselves in a predicament where we're auditing multiple departments and then taking away from the focus that needs to be placed here on the marina. But we are looking at process improvements throughout the organization in every department that we do have, from personnel all the way up to parking to recreation, special events, the manager's office. All those things will be reviewed for the purposes of operational efficiencies and policy improvements.
Our next question is from Helen Price. Were the auditors aware that the number of wet slips can change over time due to sand and mud shifting, and that the number of public slips must be maintained?
Yes, and we addressed that within our report, and I very briefly mentioned that during the presentation that, you know, some of those are subject to change based off of positioning and size of the wet slips.
Actually, the next 2 or 3 questions are from Ms. Price. Were the auditors aware that dry storage revenue was reduced to the public, was reduced due to the Public Works Department storing large amounts of equipment at the marina for many, many months? I'm sorry, I can't read this, that pipes are still being stored at the marina? Okay.
We are aware that there is a portion of that city property designated for the Public Works Department, and we weren't specifically aware of, you know, the amount of equipment that was maintained within that area or outside of that area. We were simply focused on not necessarily lost revenue because of that, but more so were the marina operations capturing 100% of the revenue from the customers actually present on a given interval at the marina.
Again, from Ms. Price. Were 3 competitive bids obtained for the forensic audit of the marina?
I'll go ahead and provide some perspective on that, as well as allow for the auditors to talk about that. One, the audit firm that was selected is actually on state contract, so it allows for us to procure services specifically with that entity. We've done that numerous times. In addition to these types of engagements, also allow for administrators to enter into contracts for those services. Per the policy, the city manager has the authorization to enter into contracts under the $15,000 threshold. Once we approach that threshold, at that time we brought the item before the Board of Commissioners to request additional spend. In the event that the Board of Commissioners chose not to move forward with the additional $35,000, the audit would have closed at that particular moment. Staff thought that in order to complete the audit, that it was warranted to move forward with the additional $35,000. The city attorney has also looked at the charter and the authorization that the manager can bring forward a recommendation that effectively allows for the procurement process to, in essence, be waived by a vote of 4-1. That vote occurred when we did bring the additional $35,000 to the Board of Commissioners for that item. Also, the auditors can tell you that this is very common in multiple municipal organizations that go through this process. So it's not something that if you were to secure a forensic auditor to look at a specific department, if you go through that competitive process and then get to a point, we would have now been starting the audit, and our concern was that there was some challenges that would arise if we had an elongated process. So I will allow for the auditor and the city attorney to provide a little bit more perspective as to what they reviewed concerning the competitive selection process.
Well, the state of Florida periodically extends bids out to all accounting firms to say, would you like to petition the state to qualify for a state contract in enabling any state agency to engage you for specific engagements? And there were a number of accounting firms that applied. 6 were selected, and we were one of those 6. So any one of those 6 firms can be selected for state contracts without going through the full competitive bid, and we were one of those 6.
And that includes municipalities and counties within the state of Florida.
Again from Ms. Price. If there was eyewitness evidence and documented proof that fuel discounts were authorized by the Board of Commissioners in 2002, will the audit be properly reissued to show only $223,558.92 at issue?
That will be up to the discretion of the city if they would like us, if that evidence is presented and they would like us to update our report. We can certainly do so if that evidence is presented and the city requests that to be updated.
Robin Belowski. I'm sorry, do I pronounce that right? Close. What is the mission of the marina now? If it is to be a public enhancement like parks and recreation or a money maker. And will this issue be addressed under a new comprehensive plan? Did I get that right, ma'am?
The intent behind the marina's operation, from my perspective, is to run it as a successful municipal operation, and it is a complement in our inventory of assets that we do have in the city. As an enterprise fund, by definition, it needs to be a self-sustaining operation. So our intent is to make sure that the appropriate policies and procedures, checks and balances are in place, that we train the employees and provide them the opportunities to be successful, and then hopefully look back at the progress that we've made and this become an asset to the city more so than it already is. And so enhancing the patrons' experience, because it's been previously communicated that this is folks' disposable income that choose to spend time with us at our marina. So we want to allow for the experience to be exceptional and second class. And that's really what our first class, we want to make sure that we don't create an environment that continues to lose revenue opportunities, because that hurts the legitimacy of our operation. So we're going to strive to make some significant improvements to make sure that folks that do visit the marina see it as, the best marina here on the Gulf Coast. And obviously there is going to be changes with respect to our comprehensive plan and how do we ensure that we continue to operate a marina in this community and make sure it's successful, working with the Board of Commissioners, working with the staff, working with the patrons to see, are we offering any and everything that our competitors are offering? So we're excited about the progress. The staff is committed to moving forward, and I think at the end of the day, probably about 6 to 8 months, we're going to see significant changes.
Our next question is from J. Roger Pryor. Why 6 to 8 months to correct the problems at the marina? Corporate world would give you 6 to 8 weeks max.
The reality is that there's certain elements that have to be researched, have to ensure that there's appropriate technology there. The marina is not connected by fiber, it's connected by coax cable. So there is some concerns with some technology deployments, and obviously, we need to go through a process to secure certain contractual services to get folks on site. We've already instituted a lot of the recommendations, but I was saying 6 to 8 months to where I would feel comfortable with the auditors coming back and looking at the things that we're doing from a operational standpoint and addressing the 25 items that are in their finding. One of the things that anyone that has visited or experienced the services at our marina is that we have a small group of employees that, you know, work copious amounts of hours, do multiple jobs, so making sure that we support them, give them the tools to be successful. There's going to be training associated with, there's new equipment that's going to have to be online, so it's a lot more comprehensive report and analysis that will have to be done in order to get us from point A to point B, but I'm confident that, you know, we should be ready to go back through this process to check the boxes in about 6 to 8 months, if not sooner.
Does that mean government moves slow?
I would not say that. I wouldn't say that. We're open, so we're already better than the feds.
Our next question is from Doreen Moore. Commissioner Oakley mentioned fund balances. The $550,000 loaned by the city to the marina to build the ship's store, has there been any payback of these funds?
There is a payment schedule that is in place, and the marina has been paying on the balances owed. One of the things that we are going to have a more in-depth conversation is because of the capital investment that will need to occur at the marina, looking at the possibility of deferring some of the payments so we can invest in the capital necessary to address the items contained in the overall analysis, but that's something that we're going to bring back before the board. But yes, payments have been made, but the assets that were acquired associated with the loan have not been paid for in full. There's still an outstanding balance.
Our next question is from Doug Andrews. Mr. Andrews, what marina experience do our auditors have with access to the man that ran the marina for 17 years? I think he meant didn't. Why didn't you use his experience in trying to decipher?
We have a variety of experience. This is essentially all in Glen. All we do is forensic engagements. Some of those engagements encompass marina, whether that be private marinas or governmental cities that include marina operations. Our firm also audits numerous marinas or cities that have marinas. We did consult with Mr. Marsicano. We did conduct interviews with him as well as the marina employees, and we took that information and put that information within our report and considered that information, and we also relied a great deal upon the documentation that was provided to us. Yes, all of the marina employees were provided with a copy of the report,
Excuse me, you're only allowed to. I asked a question. I know, if you want to ask another, question, write it down.
If you have a follow-up one, write it down on a card, because this is not the public comment period from the audience. We need to follow the proper decorum.
Our next question again is from Mr. Andrews. Which city officials actually spoke to John Hauser in regards to the discrepancies in the CAFR report?
I would defer to the city on that.
When the process of completing the 16-17 audit, the auditor, external auditor, auditor for the city, who has completed the audit, and for the last couple of years, John Hauser, indicated to me that and we were really pressed for time. We had the Hurricane Irma and a couple of other things that had hampered and delayed a little bit our completing the audit and the CAFR. In fact, we submitted an extension to the GFOA to submit the certificate of compliance, which we did receive, by the way. But the auditor, John Hauser, mentioned to me that during his tests of, he ran tests of each one of the cash collection areas, and during his tests of the marina, he did have some measuring tools that he used, and basically those parameters that he ran went outside the limits that he was comfortable with, and he shared those with me, that involved purchases at the store and specifically the fuel. And I then communicated those concerns to the acting city manager at the time and asked and requested that we have somebody go down there and just do some testing. And it was probably 4 or 5 days after that that person was able to actually go down there. It wasn't a surprise. And some of the things that we were concerned about did come to our attention. Up to that point, we weren't really sure that the cameras were not operational, and we did get confirmation that the cameras, none of the current cameras were working. So again, it was the auditor that brought this to our attention and basically suggested that we look more into it further, which we did. John Hauser brought these concerns to, I'm the finance director, and he brought those attentions to me. And once I got them, I delivered them to the acting city manager at the time and brought my additional concerns to him at the time. So he directed those solely to me.
Our next question again from Mr. Andrews. Was the $27,661 in overbilled fuel an oversight of the finance department or the marina?
I would say it was a combination of failures. The marina was the ones in charge for putting in the requisitions forms for that approval. They approved payment for each one of those invoices, and those were forwarded on to the finance department, which subsequently reviewed the information provided to them and paid the money. So it was cascading failures, if you will.
I'd like to comment too on that. There is shared responsibility in that. There was, however, a second invoice that was submitted to finance to be paid, and that did slip through. We do have a new procedure in effect that would prevent that from happening, and I have full confidence that something like that from the finance end will not happen again.
Our next question is from Ms. Helen Price. Why did the auditor go outside the relevant time period, February 2015 to August 2018, and outside the geographical limits of the marina to discuss a building on neighboring property?
As we mentioned in the presentation, during the performance of our initial procedures, we were made aware of certain irregular expenditures associated with that property that were outside of our scope and initial engagement agreement. And the city asked us to consider those and report those in the finding in order to help them respond to public records requests.
I'm sorry, it's not a back and forth if you want to ask additional questions.
So we, after that request by the city, we went back and modified our procedures to consider that.
Our next question, also from Ms. Price. Who drafted the last page, page 40, of the report, and why wasn't the report signed?
I'm the one that wrote the majority of the report, and that was reviewed by Glenn as well as a third partner as well, just for quality assurance purposes. That's signed by our firm name, and that allows both Glenn and I to speak about the report, and that's the reason why it doesn't specifically have Glenn's signature or my signature. It's on behalf of the firm. This was a report prepared by the firm, allows us to both speak on the report.
It's a regular procedure we do. It was signed as a stamp by the firm.
And that report was drafted in large part by myself in support of our staff, and Glenn and another partner reviewed it.
Our next question is from Doreen Moore. Do other marinas offer fuel discounts, and are they similar to those in the Madeira Beach Marina?
I am aware of other marinas in this area that provide various types of discounts. Some provide percentage, some provide, if you're a member of that marina or stay at that marina, you get a discount. There's variants, but we didn't take any type of analytical procedures to determine whether those discounts were in line with those other marinas.
There's two schools of thought on that. One is that discounts will encourage people to come in and buy additional gas. The other school of thought is, to be fair to everyone, you simply look at your cost of your fuel, determine what your acceptable gross profit is. That's your price. People come in, they'll pay it, and there's no negotiations, there's no bargaining. It's just a flat out. So there's just two schools of thought, but it is done both ways.
Our next question is from Mr. Robert Preston. Will the city provide a hard copy of the audit to candidates if they so choose?
It's a public document. It's available on the city's website. I believe they have received copies of the PowerPoint, but certainly I believe the clerk has a number of public copies that are available for public consumption.
Our next question is from Mr. John Hendricks. Are there plans to build a high-dry storage building to increase profits at the marina?
That particular item is an item that would have to come back for further discussion with the Board of Commissioners. I think there's a lot of things that would have to be discussed right now. The principal and primary focus for staff is to address the items contained in the report and institute those, and certainly look for opportunities to enhance, folks' business opportunities at our marina. But at the immediate moment, trying to institute the 25 findings that are contained in the report.
And this is the last question I have. It's from Mr. Hendricks. Did you know ahead of time the audit would cost more than $15,000 and this was simply a down payment?
Actually, I did not know because the first $15,000, I communicated that the nature of what we're looking for, if we think that we're able to encapsulate and address some of the items that were pinch points as communicated by the finance director, there was a thought that can close out the audit. After conversations with the audit firm and some of the other things that weren't able to be looked at, case in point as to why we went to the board and asked for additional funds to complete elements associated with the audit, because it would not have gotten to some of the major cost centers that I know that was a priority for this board, and be able to provide us some real information so we can make the necessary changes.
And a subsequent question submitted by Ms. Price. If there was no fraud or theft or criminal activity found, why was fraud discussed in the conclusion? What purpose other than to infer fraud occurred?
Fraud is always a consideration, no matter if you're doing an annual audit for the CAF or if you are preparing a forensic examination report. What we were referring to in our conclusion is regarding to the atmosphere that management created. Not necessarily that fraud was occurring, but that it induces a place where fraud could occur. And that's what we were addressing in our conclusion.
And to add to that, basically, we have the information we have to work with, and from our perspective, we don't see any, but we don't have all the information. And a state attorney or a sheriff's department may determine there is fraud. We don't know. That's not for us to call. We don't have access to those records, so we don't know. We can't say for sure there is or there is not.
Madam Mayor, that's all the questions that have been submitted. The clerk has all the questions, and they will be memorialized in the record for public review. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that brings the meeting to a close. I would like to, once again, to thank...
Well, you're supposed to do public comment first. Public comment next.
Oh, okay, I thought we did that before, but we will do it again.
That prior public comment was just on the motion to waive the rules to allow this questions on cards. So now we're going to go to regular public comment. No questions are allowed, but people can make public comment about the audit itself.
Okay. All right, public comment is now open. Mr. Preston.
Robert Preston, 425 South Bayshore Drive, Mr. Beach. City Manager Evans, you mentioned about giving the marina personnel the tools to do their job. And tools encompass a lot of things. And the commission a year or so ago gave up a $100,000 grant for a pump-out fireboat, a boat to move the barges, to do the things that they do, to put out the swim buoys and all that stuff. And all we had to come up with was $25,000. Kind of ridiculous, but they let that grant go. Are you looking at revisiting that? Or can it be revisited? Or have we lost it forever? And the other comment I had is they were comparing Gulfport's figures, and Gulfport has done a lot of improvements in the last 3 years to their marina. And with those improvements, revenues do come up with that type of improvements. So it's not an apples to apple comparison. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Doug Andrews, 9141st. I'm trying to get my arms around something, and maybe you guys can help me. I asked the question, and Walt did answer it, but I just find it hard to believe that this entire thing started because John Hauser made a comment to Walter, okay? And then Walter told Zippy the fire chimp, and we kind of went on. But John Hauser is not a shrinking violet, okay? John Hauser stands in front of you just like I'm doing right now and delivers you a CAPFA report. And he never, and this happened, by the way, when Walter just started 2 years ago, when this comment was made. John Hauser never mentioned this to you in a CAPFA report. He never said, yeah, you know, there's something crazy going on in the marina and everything. And this lasted for 2 years until we started doing it. I just find it hard to get my arms around it, that we didn't even follow up, obviously, on what John Hauser said. Nobody on this board stood up and said, John Hauser said this to me, besides Walter. We spent $50,000 on a marine audit based on something that was whispered to a brand new employee. I have a problem with it. My second thing, Ms. Weinstein, you owe Dave Marsicano a big apology, okay? Slandering his name like that in this, completely ridiculous. That guy worked for 17 years for the city. Nobody, including my friends over here, accused him of any criminal activity, okay? So don't say he had it good or anything like that. He didn't have it good. He worked his butt off. He worked 7 days a week for this city. You owe him an apology when you see him. Thank you.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, just as a form of full disclosure and clarification, there is communication between the auditor, the city's auditor, and the Director of Finance where, and I fully expect for the 17-18 audit, this is probably going to happen sometime next week, where he presents findings to me. Some of those findings are internal in nature, where he's offering suggestions and recommendations to the finance director. There is not an obligation. Some of those he may share with the board if he deems necessary and if the question comes up. But this wasn't the only concern or question that he presented to me as a finding. There were other several findings that he presented me as the finance director and that I may want to look into or be aware of. So I just want to say this wasn't just one thing that he mentioned to me as the finance director that you may want to look into or be aware of, and that is a connection and a communication that the city auditor does have with the director of finance. I just want to make that clear.
Maureen Moore, 13019 Boca Ciega Avenue. In follow-up on the reports from Mr. Hauser, this is a general comment. I believe it was year 2016-17. If you look at that CAFA report, it said very clearly that the city's expenditures are exceeding their income. So that was a financial year-end report that was delivered and given to the prior commission and administration, which no one seemed to make note of. Thank you.
I'm J. Roger Pryor at 223 144th Avenue in Madeira Beach. My concept of an audit is an opportunity. It's not a witch hunt. It's not that we go after people. My experience in audits is we just seek the truth. You shouldn't be defensive on one. Let's just look at it as though it's an opportunity to tell your story. If it's aimed at your department, then fine. Let's go and help the people find out and seek an opportunity to improve. Let's not get emotional about this and two-sided. We don't need that. We need to come together and work through these things. We all need to be friends. We all live in the big city of Madeira Beach and we love it. So let's just try to calm down and work together.
The auditors, Helen Price, 13319 Boca Ciega Avenue. The auditors relied on the Madeira Beach City Clerk's research to determine that the fuel discounts that were given at the marina before June 12, 2018 were unauthorized. I can tell you that when I moved here in 1999, about 3 years later in 2002, I was part owner of a charter boat business here in this town, and I was sitting in the audience of a commission meeting. Tom DeCesar was the mayor, Charlie Parker was there, I believe even Doreen Moore was there, in which fuel discounts were authorized and discussed. So I think we need to go back to the 2002 record, because it's been happening since then. This is no surprise. This isn't something that just came up, all right? And I know we looked at each other and went, wow, that's great. I guess we know where we're going to get our fuel now. So again, I think this audit needs to be reissued with that huge amount of 272,000 or whatever wiped out, because that's the biggest travesty, and that's the bulk of what has made this audit $500,000 so everyone can freak out about it. I do agree we should all be getting along together, but unfortunately there's a perception out there on the circumstances of how this audit came out and how it was conducted, where there's many people that believe this was a witch hunt in order to get Dave Marsicano out as the marina, or not the marina manager, heck, the poor guy was hardly ever there anymore, but as out from under the city. And that's a shame, because I think a lot of people in this city respect him and appreciate his work. I, for one, am very sad that he no longer works for our city.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Anything else on the agenda that you need to take care of? All right then. There being no further business. First of all, I would like to, before we adjourn, I would again like to thank the auditors. This was a huge job, and I would like to thank everyone here for their thoughtful and interesting comments. And I think we've all learned a lot in the process.
Madam Mayor, if I could make one last comment, I'd like to say thank you as well. And I'd like to say that the true benefit of this report starts on page 30 with the recommendations to tighten things up. That's where the value is.
Right. Thank you very much. There being no further business, we are adjourned at 4:18.